I need to have better systems. It was getting chaotic. I was like driving all over the place. I was running around. It was always like putting out fires.
Today, I'm super excited to be here with Yiwei. She's the co-founder at Peace of Homestays and Pink Cash Cow Property Management. She also puts some very educational content out in YouTube. Tell us a little bit about that process of you getting your food in the door on the real estate side of things, and then how do you go from that to eventually being able to quit your W-2 job in 2022?
I knew I wanted to do real estate, but I had no idea how anything in real estate worked. I just knew you could buy a house, rent it out, or you could buy a house and flip it, and that was it.
Mhm.
And so when I first got started, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what I'm going to do.
So, joint ventures, tell me a little bit about how you would structure a joint venture partnership perhaps differently from how you first structured your first joint venture.
I would say when doing a partnership, you better really know that partner before you get into it. It's like you're getting
Mhm.
married to somebody in a way.
If you were to start your businesses all over again, what is it that you would do differently if you could go back and change it?
If I think back 5 years ago, what I would start doing differently earlier is
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality, and where we bring together leaders, operators, founders, investors in the vacation rental and hospitality industry so they can tell us about their stories, the lessons they have learned along the way, as well as perhaps some of the mistakes they might have made along the way so we don't have to make those same mistakes as ourselves. So today I'm super excited to be here with Yiwei. She's a co-founder at Peace of Homestays and Pink Cash Cow Property Management. She also puts very educational content out in YouTube, and is an active executor of everything that she teaches. So thanks so much, Yiwei, for having this time with us today. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to be chatting with you. I like a lot of your podcasts and interviews.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that means a lot. Before we get into the background story of yours and lessons you've learned along the way, um, I'd like to start by asking you if you were to start your businesses all over again in this industry, and you could change something, if anything, maybe a mistake you might have made, and do something differently, what is it that you would do differently if you could go back and change it?
So if I had to start all over again, I've been doing short-term rentals for 5 years now. So if I think back 5 years ago, what I would start doing differently earlier is add in software and systems earlier and start inspecting after cleaners earlier. So I
Hmm.
think it took me maybe a year and a half. I want to say when I got to at least like 10 to 15 properties when I said, okay, I cannot do this on my own anymore.
Hmm.
I need to have better systems. It was getting chaotic. I was like driving all over the place. I was running around. It was always like putting out fires. And so my partner, Jared, said, you need to get systems in place so you are not always reacting and always being on the other side and be more proactive about things that are happening
Hmm.
at the properties and with the business. So I said, well, we'll slow down. So we literally had to slow down and figure all of that out and redo a lot of things to get it basically set up for more properties. So that's what I would
Right.
do
So
if I had to
taking
start
taking
again.
one step back so you can take two or three steps forward. That makes a lot of sense. And of course, there's the basic elements of a tech stack. The PMS, the dynamic pricing. Is there anything you've added recently that has also kind of make made a significant impact on your ability to be more proactive, to perhaps have certain functions more automated? Yeah, what's been the most recent addition to your tech stack?
So in terms of tech stack, I'm a simplification person. Like I
Hmm.
don't want to have like 10 million software subscriptions because
Hmm.
especially if you go to VRMA or a bunch of these conferences, there's
Yeah.
like an app and a software for everything. So I'm very much a just like a simple basic person. I have a PMS, I have a operations software which I use, the Breezeway. I've had that for years. And then
Hmm.
the most recent software I added was actually a couple of years ago. I
Okay.
actually don't remember when I added it, but it was the lock integration software. So at the time before a lot of these lock integration software came in, it was just remote lock, and we had like VAs basically like changing key codes all the time. And so now I'm on Jervis, which I think is a very reasonably priced per lock, and they're very functional. So that was the most recent one I added. So
Got
not
it.
very
Okay,
many
makes sense. No, and I
softwares
and I
in my
like
tech
I like
stack.
your approach as well. I like your approach of like trying to, you know, choose the softwares that really make sense, because otherwise you can end up with, yeah, many of them doing just one thing.
A lot of them
Awesome,
sounds
awesome.
cool, and it's like, I wanna try them, but it's like, am I actually gonna get my money back by spending another $20 a month per property or per whatever, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm. Definitely, no, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so before we go into the story how you got into the space, can you give us a 30-foot overview of, you have two different brands, right? So you have a guest facing brand, an owner facing brand. Let's start with that, right? What do you do, and why did you decide to separate those two brands, and then we'll go into how you got here.
Yeah, so my background is actually in electrical engineering. So I didn't know too much about marketing. But one thing I did know about marketing is that you cannot speak to two different guest profiles at the same time. So and that was one thing I knew early on that I wanted to separate, was have one direct booking website that focuses for the guests only, people who want to stay in our properties, who are looking for a place to stay, or like companies and insurance relocation temporary agencies, other people who are basically wanting to book. And that is the full purpose of that website and that brand, is to make it easy for guests to book. And the second one is going to be the property management side. And so that is everything the owner wants to know about what makes us different as a property manager, why you should have a property manager, and the different services we provide, and contact info for us there.
Hmm.
So I know a lot of people combine both of them, and it is efficient to do it that way. But for me, I wanted to break it up into two different websites because they are inherently two very different people who are coming into the website. And
Hmm.
so I just think if you can't speak to everyone, you have to separate it out based on what they're looking for.
And was that your view since the beginning, or did you start with a combined website and then afterwards you split it?
Yeah, that was my view from the beginning.
Okay,
We did not have a website, and when I did a direct booking website, it was both at the same time. So
got
we
it.
developed both at the same time, and then we launched both at the same time.
And how's that working for you? Because I hear people, on both sides of that argument. Some people arguing that you're kind of working in double. That, from an SEO standpoint, you're now having to, well, again, work in double. At the same time, I agree with your point of like, the messaging for an owner is very different than the messaging for a guest. So how have you managed to make that work for you?
So it is going to be a lot of double expenses. So when we think
Mhm.
about website hosting, all the things that goes behind the scenes to maintain the website, it is twice the expenses. And I feel that every single year when we pay those bills.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I feel like I cannot compromise the quality between the messaging and what the people who are coming on the websites to look for. So I feel like that is an investment that is worth spending. So when I think about owners that are coming to the websites, they are contacting us to manage their property. We ask for different types of information. And so it is just two very different ways that I feel like it's still worth paying double to maintain that, because I think it's a lot more efficient that way as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, got it. And is there one that you have found easier to, you know, rank for, or easier to, you know, get leads towards? In other words, is there like, is it easier to build that brand on the guest facing side or on the owner facing side in your experience, since you're testing both? You know, what have you learned about what it takes to succeed at building an owner facing versus a guest facing brand?
So our owner facing brand actually generates more leads that I'm aware of. The
Hmm.
guest facing brand is a lot of our repeat customers or potential leads or referrals that we get. We send them to the website. So that is a very different way people are getting in versus the owners. So owners are typically finding it through search. So I think with direct bookings, a lot of guests are still trusting the platforms, or they're trusting referrals from their friends and family, agents, other people that they've booked before. So I think building a brand on the guest facing side is to basically let everybody know that you exist and you are not a scam,
Hmm.
and you are like share what values you have. On the owner side, I think it's a lot more of a lead magnet type thing where they come in, they read what they want to say, they book a call. Because it's easier for somebody to do that than say, okay, now I'm going to just search on the website, find a direct booking site. I haven't really heard of you before because I'm usually booking on Airbnb, and then now I have to
Hmm.
make a $3,000-4,000 booking. So I've had guests who find me on the website and still reach out and say, I just want to make sure this is not scam or spam, or is, like you're not just going to take
Hmm.
my money and it's a fake listing. So I think the owner side is where I've seen a lot more like cold leads come in.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. Now let's get into a little bit of your story, right? So you moved to Cincinnati for a marketing job with, you know, with PNG, right? And then
Hmm.
you started buying some properties. Tell us a little bit about that process of you getting your foot in the door on the real estate side of things, and then how do you go from that to eventually being able to quit your W-2 job in 2022?
Yes. So my background was in electrical engineering, and that is what I did for a long time. And I wanted to get into marketing. So I was in California. I moved to Cincinnati in 2018 to do marketing. At the time, I knew I wanted to do real estate, but I had no idea how anything in real estate worked. I just knew you could buy a house, rent it out, or you could buy a house and flip it. And that was it.
Hmm.
And so when I first got started, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what I'm going to do. And I started down the rental path, and I could not make the numbers work. I'm like, even though I was looking at, like this $80,000 house, but rent was like $500. And then you
Hmm.
have a 30-year mortgage. And at the end of the month, it's like, I'm not really making any money at the end of the month with all the deductions and stuff. So I had no idea how anybody was making money in real estate. I was like, how are people doing it? Because there's a 30-year mortgage before you can even make any money, and you have all this maintenance stuff. And so I bought my first primary residence. I started with that. And when I did that, I had an apartment with a lease I couldn't get out of. So I said, let me try this Airbnb thing that my coworker talks about, because he rents his house out and
Hmm.
he just, bought a Tesla with that money. So I was like, it must be making money. So I tried it out and I did everything wrong that month, year when I first started. I had terrible guests. I had a guest who threw a party, and I just did not know anything about vetting guests.
Mhm.
But after that, I realized, this makes a lot more money than a long-term rental. And so starting then, I made my focus on short-term rentals, like
Mhm.
understanding this, how everything works, how do I find places? And at the time, arbitrage was like the thing to do,
Mhm.
make like don't invest any money and use other properties, people's properties to do short term rentals. So I tried that out. I started with one arbitrage. I bought two short term rentals downtown because I also
Mhm.
thought you had to be downtown to do short term rentals. Um, and then I started managing for other people who said I also wanted to, get into this short term rental business that's supposedly making a lot of money,
Mhm.
but I don't want to do the work myself. So then I started doing a little bit of everything, and I figured out arbitrage is not the path I want to go down because I want to
Mhm.
continue to build wealth. And that is what I always go back to with everything I do is profit first and build wealth with real estate versus just getting that cash flow, which is what arbitrage is. And
Mhm.
so I stopped the arbitrage. I only purchase or manage. And I would say I did this on the side from 2019 all the way to 2022. And that was end of 2019. So it was like a little over 2 years. And at that time, it was during COVID. So I was able to do so many things while I was working from home. Um, and then 2 years later, you had to go back into the office. And I said, I cannot go back into the office and do all this short term rental stuff at the same time. So that is
Mhm.
when I left my job in 2022 and do short term rentals full time. At that time, I was able to replace my salary from working at the corporate job. Um, but that
Congrats.
was
That's
basically the
that's
story.
amazing. That's awesome. And so right now, you have a combination of properties that you own, right, and properties that you manage. Um, what's been the timeline of your growth there in terms of, did you continue just buying more? Did you get the management contracts in to help yourself with the financing of your next acquisitions? It was a mix of like you bought one, then you got a couple of management contracts, then you bought the next, then more management contracts, and bought the next. Like, what was the timeline there, and also how did you find those management contracts as well as deals that you ended up acquiring?
Yeah, so when I started buying my own properties, I still buy and manage properties now. I think I bought maybe 4 properties by the time I maxed out my debt to income ratio. It was like I
Hmm.
literally could not get any more mortgages. And so from
Hmm.
then, I did more partnerships. So that
Hmm.
was partnering with somebody who brought on the financing, we handled the management, and we split the profit. So we did a few of those. And
Hmm.
then now, over the last 2 years, we've been able to just purchase on our own based on the income from our rentals, from savings, from the full time job that my husband has, and also from the management income as well. So the way I think about management is I love to take on properties where the owner's values align with mine on what we think is important in terms of the guest experience and investing in the right places. And if it's something I think that the guests would love in a location and amenities and things like that, I am always very honest with owners if I think that the property they have would not make a great short term rental. So my goal was never to get like 1,000 properties. It was to get a lot of properties that the guests like and will also make money for the owners because it makes no sense for me to start managing properties and the owners are like, well, this is not making that much money. So
Hmm.
it's been a combination of both. Even now, I think our goal has always been to buy at least one property a year. I think
Hmm.
over the last 2 years, when the rates were super high, when they were like 8% for investment loans, um, we couldn't find anything that worked. We bought one on owner financing, which very lucky to have gotten. And it's one of, I felt like one of the best deals we've gotten on a house, even though we overpaid on the initial purchase price. But the terms were so great. And then recently we just purchased another one through a DSCR loan. And that one we just funded ourselves with the savings we have.
Got it. Got it. So I wanna get into a couple of things there. First, first, the first four properties, those were the ones you could qualify for, yourself, with
Hmm.
your income, and then you were at capacity as far as personal borrowing capacity went. Then you started doing joint ventures. So joint ventures, tell me a little bit about how you would structure a joint venture partnership today, knowing what you know today, perhaps differently from how you first structured your first joint venture.
Hmm. I would say when doing a partnership, you better really know that partner before you get into it.
Hmm.
And because it's a long term thing, it's like you're getting
Hmm.
married to somebody in a way. But
Hmm.
you better know, like, and have everything written down in terms of what is an exit strategy, what is a buyout strategy, how do you guys handle expenses, how do you handle profits, your reserves. So having everything written down is really important from the beginning. Now, I think it was a way for us to scale at the time and work with the partners. We've worked with partners who we have known personally, either through um, people in our group here locally in Cincinnati, or somebody that I have managed their properties before, and they were
Hmm.
looking for another way to invest what because they also had a full-time job, and so we were helping them invest their money while they own equity in the property. So it was like
Hmm.
a win-win for both sides. But I would say I would recommend just jumping in a partnership with anybody, because there's so many different values. Like what's important to you is not important to them. So understanding the person is more important than the deal, I feel like, because there were
Hmm.
times when we had to make hard decisions and both partners, like, we didn't harm any partners in the way because we knew this was the right thing to do, even though it might financially not be the right thing to do. So there were different things that we had to go through. But I would say knowing your partner is like super important. But since then, not to say I wouldn't partner with them again, but since then, I just think it's a lot more freedom for you to make your own decisions, do whatever you want to do by just owning it outright. So
Hmm.
that's why we've gone back to just owning more properties ourselves.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So in terms of the current focus, and just parenthesis, you one of the things you believe is that you don't necessarily have to buy in vacation destinations, but that there's also a lot of potential in urban centers, where there's growing demand and whatnot, and there you can also have a mix of STR and monthly rentals, midterm rentals as well. Um, Tell me a little bit about how you got to that conclusion, and also what would you say to the person saying, "Hey, well, yes, but you're gonna make more money, if you go into a vacation rental destination." Like, what's your view? Is it on the financing side? Is it like, yes, we won't make as much cash flow, but we compensate for that because we can get better financing because we have more downside risk protection? How do you look at that?
So I accidentally got into Cincinnati because I moved here. So that's how I started my short term rentals. But when I first think of short term rentals, I think of it as vacation rentals, vacation destinations, not necessarily cities or especially Midwest cities like Cincinnati or Indianapolis. So it's
Hmm.
definitely not the first places to come to mind. And I would say I got started right before COVID. And so after COVID, there's this huge boom in short term rentals and vacation rentals because that is where lots of people could travel to because of this. Everybody is trying to stay away from everybody else. So everybody went into places like the mountain areas, the beaches, place where they can be more secluded. And so that drove a big increase for lots of owners who invest in short term rentals. And I would say that the reason I like investing in urban market now that I've been doing it for 5 years is that one, there are more reasons why people are coming to the market than for vacation. So vacation is only part of the guests who are coming. You have people coming here for work, for relocation, and work is not just traveling nurses, that type of thing. It's like film crews in Ohio.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a tax rebate for all movies filmed in the state of Ohio, like 30%. And so that includes housing. So there are movies that are filming in Ohio all the time, including Cincinnati, at least one or two a year. There are construction workers that are coming, management side of those construction workers. There's just a lot more reasons why people are coming. There's also medical reasons why people come. So the hospitals here are really good. And that is one reason. So, for example, in Charlottesville, that would be another place where you have a really good medical system and there's people coming not just for traveling nurses, but to get medical procedures done. And the second reason I like it is because your purchase price is low. So, there are a lot of people who say, yes, you want to buy in a vacation destination because you can make 250,000 in revenue per year. But my question is, what purchase price do you need to get that 250,000? Because if you are spending one and a half, $2 million to get 250,000 in revenue, then what is that return versus a place in a city where, let's say, you can buy a four-bedroom house for $400,000 and you can also make $80,000 in revenue. It doesn't sound as great as 250, but you know, what is that return and how much money do you actually have to invest to get started? So
Mhm.
to it's a little risky to say I'm going to buy a $1.5 million house as a first time short term rental owner and be in a vacation area where you're depending on travelers only
Mhm.
and work that out remotely because you're probably not living there
Mhm.
versus being somewhere that's close to you with a lower purchase price. And there are other reasons why people come to the area.
No, I really like what you said in terms of diversification of booking sources and revenue sources. I'm sure the purchase price side of things will vary from one urban center to another, because I'm sure there's
Mhm.
urban centers that are also, way more expensive than certain vacation destinations. But I do like what you said about diversification of revenue. Now, what I've heard is or actually, let me hear your thoughts on this, which is, you need a certain set of skills and procedures and way of doing business to succeed at, like, the traditional OTA, Airbnb, VRBO, booking, whatever, performance, right? Which is mainly majority travelers. And then you need kind of like new channels and new ways of getting, guests for all the other stuff, for the travel that is related to medical purposes, whatever it is, insurance related, relocations or whatnot. How do you manage to make them work, you know in synergy without one affecting the other? Because I can see how, for example, a 3 month, nurse that decides to come into your place all of a sudden now blocks your calendar on Airbnb or whatever other OTA for 3 months. And now when that person leaves, you're kind of starting, from zero, from a ranking perspective on Airbnb. So what have you managed to find in terms of ways to make both work in synergies without affecting each other?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, how do you balance short term rentals and midterm rentals for the
Yeah.
listings? I would say that for me, a lot of the strategies I use to balance both is partly, well, I would preface that by saying it's partly property dependent. So, this property is purely a midterm rental for traveling nurses. That is going to be what the primary focus and platform, like being on Furnished Finders and Airbnb for longer stays. And then
Hmm.
we will supplement with short term stays in between blocks if there are any vacancies, like 1 month vacancies and things like that. For
Hmm.
most of the properties, my strategy is to do short term rentals and take on midterm rental stays if the price is right, because I'm not going to sacrifice, or I would see it as opportunity cost. If I know in the high season I'm going to be able to make $10,000 on this property, but now my midterm rent is, let's say, 6,000. So that makes no sense, because even with the turnovers, I would make more money as a short-term rental. So it depends on the cost of that midterm rent. But there are a lot of times when the rent makes sense for us, especially in the slow season, like now in the winter, it's very slow. And so when a opportunity comes up, whether that's with a temporary housing insurance claim or a construction worker or people relocating to the area, as long as they're willing to pay the price, or when it's a little bit lower because I want it booked longer in the slow season, then I will take that. But I have not seen a hit in terms of the algorithm. And I
Hmm.
also asked Airbnb this at VRMA, and they said that just because you are booked or blocked off for longer periods, it really shouldn't affect your rankings, because it will show up again once you are available.
Hmm.
And I questioned that for a while, but then recently I noticed that with my properties that have been doing 3 to 4 month stays that open up, I'm still getting bookings immediately on Airbnb again, or other places,
Hmm.
for like right after that long-term stay. So I think the only thing is it's just slower to build reviews that way, because when other
Hmm.
people are booking direct, you're not getting the reviews on the platforms. So that is the only negative I see with taking the longer stays. But yeah, I think a lot of the strategy is that. And then also, I balance it with minimum night stays. So I'm not allowing people to book 2 nights 6 months out. That's
Hmm.
just not going to be allowed. I want to incentivize longer stays, longer term out. And as it gets closer, they can book shorter term stays. And I think that's something that a lot of our owners didn't understand when we first started, because you want to see bookings, like we just want to see, oh my gosh, guests are booking, and I hit a booking
Hmm.
here and there, and it makes us feel good to see bookings. But we are really optimizing for revenue and for getting the longer stays. So like
Yeah.
right now we are getting, it's almost baseball season, so there's a lot of athletes that are coming in to Cincinnati for the season. And so if I have all my houses booked out through the summer months, then if
Hmm.
they wanted to come and rent, they would not be able to. So it's, which properties are you going to prioritize as short-term rentals, and which one are you going to prioritize as midterm rentals, and then like just balancing the two based on the minimum night stays.
Yeah, no, that's I like it. It's interesting. So you choose one as a first strategy to optimize for, let's say, this property is going to be first a midterm rental or first a short-term
Mhm.
rental, and then it's like, okay, if it's first a short-term rental, what are the months where it makes sense to fill in the gap, so to speak, perhaps in slower months with longer stays, with dynamic minimum stay strategies in place, so that if the booking window is far, you don't accept 2 night stays, like you said. And then the other way around, if it's a property that makes more sense to have as a you know midterm rental first property, then you'll just be filling the gaps as far as short-term rental goes. What about regulations though? Is it becoming more challenging to find properties that can serve as both midterm rental and a short-term rental? Have you found ways to protect yourself when it comes to maybe having certain kind of zonings in place, or I guess it's very market specific, but what have you found there as far as the trend over the last 5 years?
So regulations is literally the number one thing to check when you are looking to do a short-term rental or not. And it has
Hmm.
changed a lot, just speaking here in Cincinnati over the last 5 years. So since city of Cincinnati allows short-term rentals, so if you're within the city, it's allowed, you need a license. When you're outside of the city of Cincinnati, a lot of places zoning codes have not caught up to the short-term rentals, but over the last 1 to 2 years, there have been more neighbors protesting because they don't like different cars in the driveway or whatever reason they don't like people coming and going. And so
Hmm.
there's been a lot more places that are now prohibiting short-term rentals. And so when I talk to owners who are looking or investors who are looking to buy a short-term rental, I would say I would not buy in areas where you can only do midterm rentals because that really limits you. I have a few properties where it was allowed, but now not allowed. So a lot of people are going into midterm rentals. And I think it's very lucky that we've been able to keep it booked so far. But I would say, in general, I only buy places where I can do both. When I
Hmm.
started, I just bought it. I read my own zoning code and I said, okay, I don't see any restrictions. I'm going to buy a property here. I'm going to just run it. That led me to a legal fight with one of the local townships, a 3 year legal fight that we actually won because they were in the wrong, telling us that we couldn't do it and that we wouldn't be grandfathered in. But now what I do is I get zoning attorneys involved. So in my last purchase that I made, I looked in the zoning ordinance and I did not find anything. But I got smarter after the last lawsuit that took 3 years. So I called my zoning attorney and I said, will you please verify based on your legal knowledge, because there's zoning attorneys, that this is allowed in this township? And they said, yeah, actually, I know their zoning administrator really well. So they talked to them, they called them, they got it in writing saying that, yes, we are allowing this. We are supporting this. We have nothing in the ordinances right now for it. So if anything does come up, at least we have something in writing. And this
Hmm.
seems really extreme, but learning from everything that has happened before, um, that is what I do now. I mean,
Hmm.
because if it's not written down in a zoning code or something, they can always interpret it one way, they can always change it, but you just want that in writing. So if anything does change, you are grandfathered in, which is the big thing.
Right. It makes me think of this book I'm reading that talks about not confusing proof of absence with absence of proof, or something like that. Basically, it's, like you said, if it's not in writing, it's not because they don't say that it's forbidden that it is allowed.
Doesn't mean it's not allowed. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
know. It's different when it comes to
Tricky,
law.
tricky, for
So,
sure. No, that makes sense.
yeah.
Well, now let me ask you, when it comes to all the properties you've bought throughout the years, and also the property management clients that you know have bought perhaps with your guidance, can you walk us through an example of some numbers of a particular deal that you would consider to be like an extremely good deal, perhaps one that you had to work on the terms, or where you had to make it a good deal? It wasn't necessarily a good deal at first, but you made it a good deal, just so we can get a sense of how you think about structuring your deals. And you mentioned owner financing in one of them and whatnot. Just if something comes to mind. If not, we can skip this part.
Yeah, I can share an example. So, actually, let me just pull up my numbers. So, I have two an idea I can think about. One is like what is typical of a property that somebody can buy here. I had a client who bought this, I would say maybe a year and a half ago. And this was something that where the regulations changed. So we started as a short term rental. It had a pool. It was purchased for 400,000 or a little under that. It was like 395 or
Hmm.
397. It was something like that. It had a pool. It needed a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot. It needed some cosmetic updates. So we replaced the floors, we painted. So I would say he probably added like 15,000 on top of that purchase price to other stuff he fixed. Like there's some windows that need to be fixed and that kind of thing. So, and then there's a furniture cost on top of it. So that was his total investment in. It was 400 plus furniture, which is around 30 to 35, and then the 15 to 20,000 in updates to the house. And as a short-term rental with a pool, and that was like my first experience with a pool in this area, the summer months generate about 11 to 14,000 a month in revenue, which I thought was crazy. I could not raise the rates high enough to keep up with demand. I was booked back to back to back. Every time there was like one date open, it was booked. I think in July we only had like 2 days open, and that was just like the gap days. So the pool made a huge difference. And then the neighbor did not like that it was a short term rental and the ordinances and all of that. So now it's a midterm rental. And so we've been able to keep it booked, I would say, in terms of midterm rentals at $6,000 a month right now. So it's a lot more than a long term rental, but it's not nearly going to be as much as when we did a short term rental in
Hmm.
the summer months. So I would say that is one of the biggest opportunities
No,
then.
that's good. That's
But
good.
um,
It gives me an idea. No, and yeah, I was looking for an example there. That makes sense. What about just in terms of you? You mentioned one of the things that you put a lot of emphasis on and that you really care about is you're a big believer in having a great product, great rental property, and also delivering a very high quality service. What have you learned about delivering a high quality service? Like what are some of the things you do differently now versus when you first got started that allow you to maintain or deliver better quality service in your properties?
so when I started, my values were number one, the guest has to be able to get a real person to talk to them if they want that. So that means when somebody sends a message or when somebody calls, somebody is going to answer. And it's not going to be somebody overseas, it's going to be somebody local who understands what they're asking for, who understands the context of what they're asking for and can give specific details to what they're asking for. So when they say, "Where is the wine opener?" or "Where are your favorite steak restaurants?" is not going to Google Maps.com and looking up like here are the steak restaurants in this area, or like trying to go through pictures and figure out where the wine opener is. It's like somebody who knows exactly where everything is. So I think response time and that relevance to the messaging is important. So I really like having like local people here who are going to respond and answer. The other thing is branded products. One of the things I really wanted to do was that when guests travel, I want them to feel like they are in a home away from home. And that to me means that they are using the same products at my rentals that they would be when they're at home. And that would be using Dawn dish soap, using toilet paper that is not single ply, or using detergent, like branded detergent that is very nice. And same thing with like shampoo and body wash and conditioner and things like that. We're not really using a lot of those um, white labeled products. And we're using a lot of those branded stuff, including furniture in a lot of our places, mattresses and things like that. So that was an important thing for me. Um, I would say those are the two biggest things. It's like the communication, using the branded products, and why I think it's important to have a great experience is one, when guests love it, they're going to come back because it's so hard for somebody to find something that they like that if this meets what they're looking for, they're gonna keep coming back and they're willing to pay a premium because they know that they're gonna get a certain level of service, and cleanliness was the third thing. Like, it has to be spotlessly clean. That is like number one with all hospitality. So that is I just believe that guests will pay premium when you have a great product and a great service. And I've seen
Mhm.
that personally where people have stayed with us that say, I do not book anywhere else because I know what your properties are like.
Wow. Yeah.
And to me, that is the truest form of a review and a testament is when they are willing to pay, use their wallet, use their money, and pay to stay at one of your places.
No, absolutely. No, we're couldn't be more in agreement with everything you just said, and the importance of the reviews is greater than it has ever been, and a property without excellent reviews, no matter what you do, pricing wise, listing optimization wise, won't perform. And yet a property that is more regular, right, but that has those excellent reviews because of the quality of the service, can perform extremely well. So yeah, that's why this podcast is called the hospitality edge, because that hospitality component is
Mhm.
fundamental to what we do. So yeah, Yiwei, this has been very insightful. Thanks so much for your time, for sharing all the lessons. Where can people follow you? I know you're doing content on YouTube, on social media. What are the best ways for people to follow your journey?
So Instagram is a really good way at Yiwei Cheng 1, or YouTube is the same handle at Yiwei Cheng 1 for short-term
Amazing.
rental. Yes,
And we'll make
thank
sure
you.
to put those in the description. So thank you again for taking the time. It was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.